Disclaimer, this is a video of me reacting to someone else's Five Nights at Freddy's theory. I don't always agree with them, but that has nothing to do with how I feel about them as a person, or even their channel as a whole. I have and will continue to make it clear that I am a fan of this creator, and this video is simply me providing my own opinions on their theory. This video is not trying to say that I know better or am better than this creator, it's simply me seeking out other people's opinions so that I can explain the things that I agree with, the things I don't, and so I can understand these alternate opinions whether I agree or not. Anything negative I say, or any negative reaction I have towards the theory is just me disagreeing, and I will always explain my point of view. Whether you agree with my stance or the creators, please just be civil towards both of us in the comments. Thank you, and enjoy the video. Hey, what's up guys, ImpulseEvan here, and today I am bringing you guys another video, and in this video I'm going to be reacting to the newest FNAF game theory. Game theory, FNAF, the missing key is phone guy. Now, I'm assuming that this is going to be about this book right here, FNAF the Week Before, the first numbered interactive novel, number 1, because there was number 0 VIP, but this is number 1, the week before, and I am actually late to read this book. This came out like 2.5 months ago, I think now. And I haven't released a video on it yet. I planned to, like, in September when it came out, and then I just didn't. I don't know why. I think just because of school, it's kind of hard to focus on YouTube during school. Obviously, I still have school right now. That's why I don't really upload as much as I used to anymore. But I do still work on theories and videos in the background. I've finished writing and recording my video on the week before, and I've edited about a quarter of it. I'm hoping to release that this week, but to hold you guys off, I wanted to do a reaction to this, because usually I do reactions to FNAF game theories anyway. I didn't do the Into the Pit one, but that's because I haven't really gotten into the theorizing part of Into the Pit yet. Even though it came out in August, and now it's almost December, I just haven't gotten into the theorizing of Into the Pit. But yeah, so I do want to do that at some point. I think I'll probably, one day, I don't know when, I'll probably do like a theory discussion video or something, where I hop in a call with my friends, and they just update me on all the Into the Pit lore. I know a little bit of it. I've seen some of the behind-the-scenes stuff, or not behind-the-scenes, but like stuff that people discovered and stuff like that. But I haven't gotten into the theorizing aspect of it. That's why I didn't react to the previous FNAF game theory, because if I don't really know where the lore is coming from, if I don't know the source material very well, then it's hard for me to, like, do commentary or, like, a reaction to the video. But even though I haven't done my video on the week before yet, I have read it. I have read the whole thing, so I'll still be able to follow along and give my own 2 cents on what Tom says in this video. Also, I should mention, I know that I'm in this video, not like literally me, but like my profile picture, like, it's happened before, like where, like, just theorists are mentioned and I'm on the list. I know it's like right at the end of the video, it's just being like, oh yeah, if you guys have questions about the lore, I got a group of people for you to look at, and then like I'm up there. I should say that, although it is really cool when that does happen, don't tell me about it, because I was streaming Resident Evil 4 Remake a few days ago, and, like, on the day that this came out, on Saturday, and people were telling me, like, in chat, that, that I was in this video, and it's not really as fun when people tell you, like, of something really cool that happens, because then you don't get to react to it yourself. That happened the first time, too, when I was first in the game theory, when it was, why you all hate my FNAF theories. I was in, like, my profile picture was also in that video, and people, and Sandwich Man actually told me on Discord about it before I watched it, like, right before I reacted to it. Although I didn't end up doing a reaction to that because, well, it turned out that my audio wasn't recording the whole time, so, yeah, but Sandwich Man told me about it before I even watched it, so it wasn't as cool when I was reacting to it. I would have been like, what the fuck? But yeah, I didn't get to do that because I was spoiled. So yeah, just for future reference, don't tell me when that happens. Obviously, I appreciate you guys, like, letting me know. I appreciate, like, the intention behind that. Just, it's not as fun, like, if you already know that it's coming. Which is why I do reactions to these videos, and if for some reason my mic audio isn't recording during a reaction, I'll just not do the reaction. That's what happened with the Why You All Hate My FNAF Theories video. My audio wasn't recording, my mic wasn't recording the whole time, and I'm not, because I've already seen the theory, I'm not going to react to it again, you know? So, because it's a first reaction. That's the point of these reaction videos. And it's to, like, gauge what other people are saying in order to help, I guess, with my own understanding of certain FNAF theories and stuff like that. I mostly just react to game theories and some FNAF theories, but, like, FNAF, John. I react to some of his videos. I reacted to, like, a couple Raitos videos, but I don't really react to as many theories anymore. I used to do it all the time, but now I guess I'm just, like, I still like watching theory videos. It's just, like, I don't do it as much anymore, I guess. But, yeah, I mostly just watch theory videos when I'm actually reacting to them, which is mostly just the game theories. And I'm always working on my own theories in the background. But it's always good to, like, get updates. That's why, like, I'm still on Discord and stuff, see what other people are saying. Anyway, I've been talking for, like, 5 minutes. So let's just get to reacting to the game theory. So, like I said, I'm assuming it's about the week before. In fact, I know for a fact it's about the week before. It says, we've all been wrong about FNAF 1, so I'm assuming it's talking about the timeline of FNAF 1. I, for the longest time, thought that it was in 1993. And then reading this book, I have a different opinion now. Why is... That's a funny face to have right there. But yeah, now I think it's 1989, because in the book, there is the Sega Genesis. The Sega Genesis is mentioned, which came out in 1989. And this video by this YouTuber named The Unwithered Truth, I found that video. I was going to make my own, like, mini theory out of it, but then I found that video, and he basically expressed all the things that I was thinking and more in order, like, so I was like, I deemed it unnecessary, basically, and I also shouted out that video in my week before video that's coming out in the future. So, yeah, I didn't think it was necessary for me to do the video if he already came up with everything that I came up with, but even more than that, too, because there was also, like, the pop culture references throughout the book. They all go up to the year 1989. They're all from prior to 1990. They're in 1989 or earlier, and none past 1989, which indicates that the year of the book, and by extension FNAF 1, because it's a week before FNAF 1, is 1989. So that's kind of my take on it. Plus, Capelia, Ralph's daughter in the book, Phone Guy's daughter in the book, she apparently went to Freddy's at a certain point 4 years ago for her 7th birthday. She's 11 now. Her 7th birthday, she went to Freddy's. And that means that there's only 2 options for when she could have gone, because there was no Freddy's open in 1986, and there was no Freddy's open in 1988. But there was... Okay. Yeah, there was no Freddy's open in 1986, and this book... well, because 1989 is when, like, the cutoff was. So it has to be 1989 or later. And we know that this Freddy's location just opened recently, so it couldn't have been previously in this Freddy's location, which means it had to either be FNAF 2's location, so 1987, which would place the book in 1991, or the first Freddy's location, and which closed in 1985, so it would have to be 4 years after that, and it can't be any less, and it can't be any earlier. It can't be like 1984 either, because, like I said, the book has to be at least 1989. So, yeah, with all that being said, I think that the book, the FNAF 1, sorry, has to either be in 1989 or 1991, and because the pop culture references end at 1989, and because the Sega Genesis actually came out in 1989, it seems like that's the year that it's pointing towards. So, yeah. Again, I've been talking for a long time. It's been like 7 minutes or so that I've been talking now, so let's actually watch the theory now.
We've all been wrong about FNAF.
I hope I didn't just get all my opinions across, so I won't have anything to talk about throughout this video. Hopefully I do.
We've all been wrong about FNAF 1. Since its release, its place in the timeline has remained an unconfirmed mystery. But now, we have the week before. A book set the week before the very first game. Will it solve this 10-year-old mystery, or is it going to leave the timeline even more broken? Hello, Internet! Welcome to Game Theory, the show that reads the FNAF books so you don't have to.
But I do anyway.
Seriously, why are there 25 of these things? But regardless of how I feel about the mere existence of these things, Scott is still pumping them out, and now we've got a new series of interactive novels starting officially with The Week Before. For those of you who don't know, The Week Before is FNAF's legally distinct version of a choose-your-own-adventure book. They can't legally call it that because it's trademarked, don't worry about it. In this book, we take on the role of Ralph,
the phrase "choose your own adventure" is
trademarked. The night shift the week before FNAF 1, the same security guard that we hear during each night of FNAF 1.
Yes.
Hello. I wanted to record a message for you to help you get settled in on your first night.
That's right, Ralph is Phone Guy. Nice to finally put a name to
I mean, they even call him Phone
From
Guy
here,
in the book.
You get to choose how
like
the
they say that he is known as
Some
the
parts
phone
will
guy.
take you through the pizzeria that we know so well at this point. Others will offer you new storylines, and others will land you exactly where Phone Guy ends up during the Night 4 call of FNAF 1.
Yes. That was really cool to see in the book when I was reading it.
As you might have guessed, this book has caused quite a stir in the FNAF community. Firstly because, well, it's actually a pretty good book. The interactive element really gamifies the whole reading experience and builds the anticipation of where it's going. But
while I was reading the book, I made sure to choose each distinct path. Like, in the book, there's times where it's like you have to choose which page you go to, right? Here. And what I would do is I would go on each path to see all the game overs, and then if there was multiple paths that diverge and then come back to meet one single point, then I would go to all of them. And if there were some where there was multiple paths, but if you go to one, you go back to another one. This is hard to explain, but like, say it tells you can either go to page 110, 111, or 112. If you go to page 111, then you go back to the page where you're told to make the choice. So it's basically like you do side missions, I guess, in a way. So you can go over, sometimes you can find items there. And so basically, I just did everything that you possibly could in the book. And I'm definitely going to do that again when I read Return to the Pit and Escape the Pizzaplex when those come out. And eventually, I'm probably going to do a video on VIP 2. Even though I'm like 4 months late, I'll still probably read it at some point and do a video. I mean, I'm 2 months late to this video, or like to a video on the week before, so yeah.
The real reason it's become such a hot button topic is because it provides us with answers to some of our most burning questions about this franchise. Not just who Phone Guy is, but who did the bite of 87, with the employees' new tactics of flashing their lights to stop the animatronic, and Phone Guy's insistence that the animatronic never bit a kid, with the emphasis on kid. All signs point towards it being Foxy. How many spirits are inside?
I should say, I don't think that is actually the case, because in FNAF 2, all of the toy animatronics also have that thing where shining lights at them makes them stop working. And even the Wizards do too. It doesn't work on Chica in this book, but in FNAF 2, you actually never shine your light on Chica except in the cameras. But Withered Bonnie you can shine your light on, and I'm pretty sure he can actually leave if you do shine your light on him. I could be wrong about that. But in this book, you shine your light on, Ralph shines his light on Bonnie, and it actually works on him. It's not just a Foxy thing. It's an all animatronics thing, including the toy animatronics, which it makes much more sense for a toy animatronic to have done the bite, because the withered animatronics are kept after FNAF 2, but the toy animatronics are scrapped because of glitches. So that indicates that a toy animatronic is who did the bite. Also, the bite of 87 was said in the book, Foxy in the book was said to be out of order, and not for kids, but he probably didn't bite any kids, specifically kids. But I interpret that more as him being like, he didn't bite any kids, but I'm an adult, so he might bite me. And sure, that could be saying, yeah, he did bite an adult, but that doesn't necessarily have to be what it's saying. And it's also said that Ralph would go visit Pirate Cove at the end of all his shifts until they shut down Pirate Cove. And what that indicates is that Pirate Cove was shut down during the lifespan of one of the Freddy's locations, because Pirate Cove wasn't a thing in FNAF 2, which is where the bite of 87 actually happened. So why would Pirate Cove even be used in the FNAF 1 location if Foxy was the one who did the bite? That indicates that Foxy was put out of order during the lifespan, meaning he was still used in FNAF 1 even after the bite of 87, which wouldn't make sense if he was the one that did it. Plus, if it was during the first Freddy's location that he was shut down, then that Pirate Cove was put out of order, then that also wouldn't make sense if Foxy did the bite, because it would have been before the bite of 87 even happened. That doesn't mean Foxy couldn't have done the bite of 87, it just means that him being out of order is probably not because he did the Bite of 87. That's what I think. The most popular theories are that Toichika or Mangle did the Bite of 87. I'm a Mangle believer, mostly because of the jump scare the jump scare that comes from the top of the ceiling and goes directly for your head. Some people believe it's Toichika because of the Ultimate Custom Night line, where she's like, "Where's my beak lodged in your forehead?" Of course. And there's also a thing in this book where it's talking about, I don't remember exactly what it was. I don't mention it in my week before video, but I remember there was a thing where it was mentioned that like Sheikah would like peck you to death or something like that. That's not something that happened to Ralph. I think it was just like something that Ralph had heard about, like a rumor or something. But yeah, that's my take on it. I don't think Foxy did the Bite of 87. I can see why people are coming to that conclusion, but I don't think that that's what the book is trying to imply. But I could be wrong, obviously.
Side of Golden Freddy. Well, according to the Sixth Night, Ralph is overwhelmed by a noise of "it's me" when he's touched by Golden Freddy. But underneath that noise is a different voice speaking in full sentences. Two voices, two spirits. Who those spirits are and how it works are theories for another day. But it's been so exciting.
I don't think that spirit is actually in Golden Freddy, because it's said that excuse me. The woman that is saying that's Bronwyn, who was a reporter that had died at Freddy's. And Ralph had previously seen her in a spare Freddy animatronic in the back room, which you could say is Golden Freddy, but also Ralph talks about Golden Freddy, and he doesn't make the connection between the two. So that indicates that it might not be that Bronwyn is actually in Golden Freddy per se, but rather just a Freddy animatronic, and that Golden Freddy that he saw wasn't the one talking, it was just Bronwyn's spirit in the building talking to him, just saying thank you. Plus, there being two spirits, sure, that could definitely be the case, but that would indicate that Bronwyn is the one that is possessing Golden Freddy, which I guess she could be, but we should have been, if that was the case, if she was like one of the main spirits in Golden Freddy, that would make sense, because she would have to have been mentioned previously in the series, and she never was. Anyway, I've talked so much in this video already, and we've made it 2 minutes into the video, so we should just keep watching.
To finally feel like we're getting some answers to questions we've had since that very first game. However, the biggest question that I and many other theorists wanted answered was, what year does FNAF 1 take place? This book is literally set the week before FNAF 1, so if anything was going to give us the answer, it would be this. Or so we thought. In true FNAF fashion, while offering answers to some questions, this book is cryptic about others. But as I went back through the book and the evidence surrounding FNAF 1's date, I noticed something. We've been looking at this entirely wrong. There's a detail that's been hanging over us for a whole decade. A detail that changes not just when in the timeline FNAF 1's pizzeria existed, but the entire timeline as we know it. Grab your camera viewing tablets, friends, because we gotta go back.
I'm assuming what he's gonna say is that FNAF 3 was apparently 30 years after FNAF 1, and we interpreted that as 2023. But now we know, because FNAF 1 isn't in 1993, that FNAF 3 is not in 2023. It's either 2019, or it could be like earlier, like it could have been 30 years after the original Freddy's closed, so in 2015, which is also the year that FNAF 3 came out.
Back to the original Freddy's for one more night to figure out when FNAF 1 really takes place. 1993 has basically been the de facto date for FNAF 1 ever since Matt's very first FNAF episode. He used the amount of money earned in the week and compared it with the minimum wages throughout the years, which landed him somewhere in the early 90s. Combine that with the fact that most weekly employees are paid on Fridays, with the date we get paid in FNAF 1 being November 12th, and you find the only year that fits is 1993.
Yes.
We almost got confirmation of this date too, thanks to some leaked Faz facts from FNAF AR, saying things like Fazbear's twisted pizza recipe was voted most yummy by 6 out of 10.
I think those were said by Illumix to have been like, just a random employee came up with those just for fun, and then they were scrapped anyway, so they weren't supposed to be accurate.
Children in every survey from 1988 to 1993. But we were later told by Illumix, the company that made the game, not to use this cut content for lore purposes. These might have been cut because Scott just likes to be cryptic, or it could be because the date was wrong. Either way, it did sow the seeds of doubt within the community about the legitimacy of 1993 as our FNAF 1 year. Since then, a couple of other dates have been thrown around, but despite all of the theorizing, we've never had something that felt truly solid, which was where we all hoped the week before would come in and save the day. And at first, it seemed like it was doing just that.
So, another thing that people have pointed out a lot is that in FNAF 2, 1987, the day that we're paid from the paycheck is I think it's a Saturday, or it's something. But in 1987, it's I think November 11th or 12th again, like in FNAF 1. But that day is like slightly offset, and if you use the same calendar, it actually matches 1992 and not 1993, which would be like a day off.
Throughout the book, Ralph
so a lot of people think
FNAF
1 is
1992 during the first game, but he also listens to his old recordings that, according to him,
from 1987,
very long ago.
Yeah.
Quote, "It's strange to listen to a recording of
from
yourself,
FNAF 2,
especially one from so long ago. If you remember correctly, your daughter had just been born." I know, it is strange listening to a recording of yourself. Welcome to my life, mate. At the very
when was that? I don't
story,
actually remember that part of the book. I gotta look back through that to find that, because I don't remember that, whether it's at the beginning of the book or somewhere else. Imagine it's something that I actually missed. Maybe I actually missed some pages or something. I don't know. But I don't remember reading that, so I might have just been... Oh, wait, no, I think I do remember that, actually. I don't know. Okay, I'll just continue.
We learned that Ralph's daughter, Capella, is 11 years old. And so, if this recording was made around when she was born, and that initial recording says it's from Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, not Fredbear's Family Diner, then the earliest this game could take place is 11 years after Freddy's opened in 1983, making the year 1994. Now, there's always a chance that he recorded the calls a year or so before the opening, or he simply rounded up the year. The phrase "just been born" could mean sometime between Capella literally being born and being 12 to 24 months old, which would allow for 1993 to still fit the bill here. That is, if it wasn't for something YouTuber The Unwithered Truth pointed out. They also did a whole video trying to figure out the year of FNAF 1, but they found
this is the video I was mentioning
detail.
before.
The page where we're told Ralph recorded these phone guy messages around when his daughter was born has two major faults. The first is that to get to this page, it requires some really odd pathway choices. By getting through to the sixth night on your first playthrough, you unlock a mobile phone, which the book calls the bonus item. You then need to restart the book with the bonus item in your inventory. At various points, the book offers you a chance to use the bonus item, and you're encouraged to do so whenever this option is presented, because that leads to the canon FNAF 1 phone calls being recorded.
Yes.
However, to get to the page about when your daughter was born, you actually have to reject recording the Night 1 phone call. On this new path, you instead need to call the voicemail service, but to do that, you need a code. This code is on the mobile phone's speed dial, but you would only know that if you had taken the previous prompt and used the bonus item to record the Night 1 phone call, skipping this voicemail section entirely. Plus, it doesn't use the typical bonus item prompt. It just says if you have the 4-digit code. Without the bonus item, you'd never know what this code is.
I don't remember.
But
did
if
I
you
actually
have the bonus
do that?
item, you'd have likely skipped this page and recorded the Night 1 phone call. Yes, it is technically possible to do things this way, but it flies in the face of logic for the reader. Of course, you could just dismiss this as a small mistake, but then once you do get to the page about your daughter's age, we find another.
I don't remember if I actually checked
that. It contains information that directly contradicts other information in the book. On this page, it tells you you've never brought Capella here, as in where you work, Freddy Fazbear's. Yet later on in the book, it says she's never gotten over the time you brought her to work to meet the animatronics when she was 7. Both of these things cannot be true. Either she's been to Freddy's or she hasn't. And so it makes it really difficult to lean on Capella's age as a defining piece of evidence to settle this debate. Fortunately, there are a few other clues to help us out. Throughout the book, it becomes clear that Ralph has a bit of an affinity for modern pop culture, specifically movies and TV shows. On page 147, he references The Goonies. On page 194, he punches in the code
a lot of
1, 2, 3, 4. And when it's wrong, says that would be a combination an idiot would have on their luggage. The same line from the movie Spaceballs. When fighting against the animatronics, Ralph's daughter yells, "Try holy water, death breath," which comes from the movie The Lost Boys. This thing is full of references like this, and they're mostly from the 1980s. The Goonies was first released in 1985, Spaceballs was released in 1987, and The Lost Boys was also released in 1987. However, there is one year that comes up more commonly. On page 157, Ralph says how Bruce Willis makes crawling through vents look easy, referencing Die Hard from 1989. On page 176, he mentions watching Lethal Weapon movies, as in more than just the original, with the sequel coming out in 1989. He even references an episode of Star Trek on page 8, Who Watches the Watcher, an episode that was released in 1989. And finally, he mentions his daughter playing a Sega Genesis console, which was released in, you guessed it, 1989. With all of these references to the same date,
but they all cut
really
off
feels like the emphasis
from
is on this year, especially given that none of these references come from media that goes beyond November 1989, the month which we know FNAF 1 takes place, thanks to the paycheck. And if you remove the broken page about recording the phone calls when Ralph's daughter was born, you no longer need to worry about Freddy's being around 11 years prior, which makes 1989 feel like a really solid candidate, at least at first. As I said, there are a bunch of references in this book, but there's only one that is mentioned twice. Time to make the donuts. This is the catchphrase of Fred the Baker, a character from a bunch of Dunkin' Donuts commercials introduced in 1981. That feels pretty in line with what we've already established. It's just another 80s reference. Except Fred the Baker and his catchphrase extended beyond the 1980s. The last commercial with Fred saying his iconic line was 1997.
Time to make the coffee, time to make the donuts.
So while yes, the catchphrase did exist in the 80s, this means we can't rule out the possibility that it takes place sometime in the 90s. And to top it off, there's one other reference that throws a spanner into the 1989
say that it has to be in the 90s.
No, I'm not kidding.
What?
Disney is canon in the FNAF universe.
I mean,
people thought we were crazy for comparing
but
their mascot designs to FNAF in our Ultimate Timeline, but here we are. Quote, you smile, thinking back on better times. For a while, you'd have said that Freddy Fazbear's Pizza was the happiest place on Earth, if you weren't worried about infringing on a trademark.
I remember
the
that part,
happiest place on Earth is, of course, the slogan for Disneyland, which opened in 1955. However, the key detail in that line isn't the slogan, but the kind of lawsuit Ralph is afraid of: trademark infringement. We spoke about trademarks in our recent Poppy Playtime episode, but the basic gist is that a person or business can trademark a phrase to stop others using it to sell their own products. In this case, it would be to stop other parks or franchises calling themselves the happiest place on Earth, as that could lead to visitors thinking they were visiting an official Disney attraction when actually they were going to a Murder Bear pizzeria. To get a trademark, you have to apply for it, making it an official legal thing that you own. And despite being around since 1955, Disney didn't actually register for that trademark until 1998. For Ralph to be afraid of trademark infringement, this book, and therefore FNAF 1, has to take place after the trademark was filed in...
I will say that I don't think that that would be the case, because it's said in FNAF 2 that Ralph, phone guy, would take the job at Freddy's, like for like the night shift, when the restaurant opens again. And the Bite of 87, or at least whenever Ralph started working as the night guard, is referenced as being really recent, meaning this Freddy's location just opened, and because he worked in 1987, it seems like he probably hasn't been working the night shift in like he'd only been working it for like the past like month. Okay, maybe not just a month, but like it's been really recent that he started working there. So it feels like the Bite of 87 and the previous Freddy's location were much more recent than like 10 years, 11 years. So I doubt that that would be the case. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if that was just like, if that was just like an error on Scott's part. Like that wouldn't surprise me. Because I would assume that they still called it the happiest place on Earth before they applied for the trademark. And yeah, Ralph is worried about the trademark, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's either a mistake or if Ralph just didn't know that they didn't have the trademark for it. Like, I wouldn't be surprised by that.
This isn't a totally out there date for FNAF 1 either. I know Rye Toast has liked the idea of FNAF 1 being in 1998 for some time, mainly due to the date given to us on the FNAF paychecks. In FNAF 1, we're paid on November 12th, and in FNAF 2, we're also paid on November 12th. Only this time, we know the year, 1987. That isn't a Friday as we initially discussed, but a Thursday, implying Fazbear typically breaks the mold and pays on Thursdays. And another year with November 12th on a Thursday is, as you might expect at this point, 1998. Okay. This date would also allow for Capellia's age to work if you wanted to include that detail, as 11 years prior is 1987.
Okay, but the biggest issue with that, though, is that she went to Freddy's 4 years prior. That would be 1994, but there was no Freddy's location open in that time. So it just wouldn't really make sense because the FNAF 1 location didn't open until just recently, and the FNAF 2 location was shut down, and the withered animatronics were used for the FNAF 1 location, meaning that there was no Freddy's location. There probably wasn't a Freddy's location in between that. Technically, it would be possible though. Like I guess it could be possible that like another Freddy's location could open between then, and I guess I don't know. I don't think that another Freddy's location would be open between FNAF 2 and 1. Because, like, we never heard of 1 being open in that time. That wouldn't really make much sense to me. I don't know. Technically, it is possible, but I can't think of anything right now that debunks that being the case. I might have to look into that a little bit. I gotta think about that. I don't know. Let me know in the comments if there's anything that definitively states there's no Freddy's location open between FNAF 2 and 1. Because I don't think there's anything that says that it can't be. I don't think that there would have been. I feel like it would have been mentioned. And I feel like there had to have been something that like would have implied that at any point. And it just seems a little bit weird for there to be one in that gap. And it just seems like FNAF 1 was like shortly after FNAF 2. But, like, it could have happened? I don't know. There might be something that's, like, preventing that from being the case, but I gotta think about that a little bit more. Maybe look into that, see if there's anything else that, like, prevents that from being the case.
Same year as the grand reopening of Freddy's in FNAF 2. Finally, it also works with a line that has bugged us theorists for years. During night 1 of FNAF 1, Ralph's phone call mentions that these characters were, quote, forced to sing those same stupid songs for 20 years. 20 years prior to 1998 would have been 1978. Since Help Wanted 2, we have been aware that the franchise has existed since the 1970s, and in the Secret of the Mimic teaser, we saw the date 1979 pop up.
I should say that I don't think that that's I think that line is actually referring to something that we see in the Mimic story, which also takes place in 1978 or 79. It's talked about that Edwin is turning costumes, Fazbear costumes, into animatronics, meaning that animatronics weren't a part of the original Fazbear Entertainment, like, shows and stuff like that. Maybe the restaurants too, meaning that they were just costumes initially, kind of like the Mimic's costumes in Ruin, and kind of like the costumes that the Mimic wears in the epilogues and in the Mimic story. It's just regular costumes, and then those costumes are turned into animatronics. Endoskeletons are made, shells are made, the costumes are wrapped around the shells, pretty much, is how that works. So, it's just costumes initially, so maybe the Freddy's animatronics were just made using costumes that were made back in the 70s. They weren't turned into animatronics yet, but they were later on. So, like, that would be weird, though, because if FNAF 1 was in 1989, then that would mean the costumes would exist in, like, 1969, but it's also possible that it wasn't actually 20 years. It could have just been rounding up. So it could have been like the early 70s the costumes were made, and then they were just, and Ralph was just rounding up, and it was actually like 17, 18 years or something like that. That could also be possible. I don't know. It's an interesting idea though for it to be 78 and then FNAF 1 being 98. I still just find it weird, like, the gap between FNAF 2 and 1, though. I don't know. Again, like I said, I have to think about that.
Very close to that 20 years prior. And just like it's possible he was rounding years for the phrase just been born, it's not too much of a stretch to believe he rounded up to 20 years when it was actually a year less, and it was 1979. So is that it? Is 1998 the year of FNAF 1? Honestly, I thought so for a pretty decent chunk of time. But as I was going back through all the evidence, something struck me. The quote from Ralph about singing those songs for 20 years, it's not the full quote. We often spend a lot of time focusing on the 20 years part because that feels like a definitive amount that we can fit into whatever timeline we come up with. But the full line gives us an extra detail about exactly what he's referring to.
If I were
they haven't had a bath, they haven't been
those same
cleaned.
Stupid songs for 20 years and I never got a bath, I'd probably be a bit irritable at night too.
Did you catch it? Ralph mentions them never being washed in those 20 years. You can't wash a character it's just a fictional concept, which means this line has to be referring to the animatronics themselves.
I think the costumes
he also states
also
that
work.
he was so happy that they restored Freddy and the gang to their vintage designs.
And, like, obviously he doesn't actually believe that. Like, he's just being sarcastic. So, like, it just being the costumes before they were even animatronics, before they were even living things, like, that also would make sense, because he's just exaggerating, like, making a joke, being sarcastic about them actually, like, being intelligent, I guess.
New animatronics.
So the costume idea works in that case.
These are old animatronics that have been restored. The same ones that have been around for 20 years. His joke about not getting a bath is just his explanation for why they smell, as during the canon run of the week before, he never discovers the truth about the kids' bodies being stuffed inside. Ralph's not talking about the characters of Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy. He's talking about the physical animatronics. And that changes everything. Because if these 4 animatronics have to have been around for 20 years, then that means there's only one date FNAF 1.
There's another thing that I think is a little weird. It's the fact that it said that, like, in FNAF 1, the paycheck we get is $4 an hour, and by 1998, I think that's below minimum wage. And I think so I feel like it has to be earlier than that. And, like, if it's 1989, I think that might be above minimum wage, but you don't necessarily have to be paid minimum wage. You could be paid more than that. So I feel like that, like, could work fine, too. But it's just weird if it's 1998 for it to be below minimum wage. So I feel like that kind of throws a wrench into it, too.
One can be. We've seen that time and time again, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza was officially established in 1983. If the animatronics from FNAF 1...
Before he says anything, I have to say that although Freddy's opened in 1983, the Freddy's animatronics probably existed before that. Like I said, the costumes existed, and in the Mimic story, Edwin is seen turning the costumes into animatronics. That story takes place in 1978 or 1979, which means that the animatronics, they didn't just exist as costumes before Freddy's opened. They existed as animatronics before Freddy Fazbear's Pizza opened too. So that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be 20 years after 1983. It could just be 20 years after whenever the costumes were turned into animatronics, like 78 or 79. Or, like I said, it could just be referring to the costumes themselves, in which case it could be even earlier than that.
Are supposed to be the same animatronics restored to their original vintage designs, then that would mean the earliest FNAF 1 could take place is 2003. But what about the secret of the Mimic teaser? That showed the franchise was active in 1979. And that's true, but it's not taking into account the era of FNAF that game takes place in. In the books, the Mimic is invented as one of the earliest ever animatronics, designed to mimic the routines of others and wear whatever costumes it needs in order to become that character. This is the costume era of FNAF, not that.
Yes, but like I just said, this is not just the costume era. This is the era where the costumes are being turned into animatronics. The era where the animatronics are being created.
Fully fledged animatronics. Edwin, the creator,
the costumes
of
did exist, and the
animatronics
were
of the main
made
four, but they haven't
from the
debuted
costumes
yet.
already.
We saw the same thing at Steel Wool's PAX West booth, where they showed a sneak peek of the game. On the walls was a poster saying Freddy Fazbear's Pizza coming soon.
Coming soon,
the
my ass. It's 4 years later.
have not yet taken center stage. They haven't started singing those silly songs yet, so the 20 years needs to start after they've debuted.
It's possible that those animatronics were used at Fredbear's Family Diner, and then they were removed, leaving just Fredbear and Spring Bonnie once Freddy Fazbear's Pizza actually opened up.
Original animatronics have not yet taken center stage. They haven't started singing those silly songs yet, so the 20 years needs to start after they've debuted. Once again, pointing us to 1983, and
like I just said, they don't have to have
2003.
debuted when Freddy's opened. They could have
Wage,
debuted before
or the
that
paychecks, or the references. It's true. Earning $120 for 5 nights of 6
Yeah,
hours
that's what I
work is
said.
$4 an hour, while minimum wage in 2003 is $5.15. But I'd also point out that after completing the 6th night, you only get an extra 50 cents in overtime pay, which, regardless of whether it's 1989, 1993, or 2003, is still way too low. I'm just not convinced Scott thought through the amount.
I guess that's kind of fair.
As for the dates, the 12th of
I guess that's kind of fair, but there's also the issue of FNAF 2's paycheck being perfectly aligned with the minimum wage of 1987. So Scott probably did take that into account. However, there's also the fact that that's FNAF 2, so it could have been like he learned from people theorizing about the paychecks, so maybe he decided to make it accurate on purpose. But like, I just find that weird, the fact that it is accurate in FNAF 2. Like, yeah, he could have learned from that, he could have done that on purpose to fix it, to be accurate, but I just feel like it makes more sense if he was always taking that into account, right?
November 2003 is a Wednesday, and so it doesn't line up with FNAF 2's pay schedule. The only explanation I could offer is that in the movie, Mike learns about the job on April 6th, 2000, a Thursday, and the next day calls Afton and starts the job on Friday night, making his 5th night and the day he would typically be paid, Tuesday. So we can't necessarily guarantee Fazbear is paying on the same day of the week for all of those years. As for all of the references in the week before, well, just because references exist in the 90s...
In that case, 1989 also still works.
1980s, or the trademark was first established in 1998, it doesn't mean that's the only time those things can be mentioned. My dad only references Top Gun, which came out in 1986, despite the fact he goes to the cinema every other week. References like this can limit the earliest it can take place, but not necessarily how far into the future it goes. If it is 2003, this would mean that FNAF 1 takes place 16 years after the closure of 1987, which, if you're trying to revitalize a franchise, feels like an awfully long time
seems
to
really
wait.
weird.
Although we all know the power of nostalgia with older audiences these days. As for the future parts of the franchise, this is
Silent Hill 2 was peak.
where I'll admit things fall apart a little. FNAF 3 takes place 30 years after the closure of Freddy's, which would then become 2033. That isn't an...
Yes, but also it doesn't necessarily... Okay, I thought for the longest time that it was after FNAF 1, but it also could make sense to be in... It makes sense also to be 30 years after the first Freddy's closed, after the missing children incident, in which case it could have just been 2015.
Issue by itself, but based on this poster and the calendar from Security Breach, it's been theorized that Security Breach takes place in 2035.
I also thought that it was 2029 for a while, and now something just happened that has kind of thrown a wrench into that idea, and I'm trying to work around it, or not work around it, but like work it into what I believe now and try to figure out how everything works. Timeline-wise, basically something from the books that pushed Security Breach to 2029, something from the books that pushed Security Breach to 2029 for me, apparently was changed because apparently it seems to have been a mistake. I'll probably talk about that in a future video, but apparently something was changed. And I've seen what it is. I'm not going to say what it is now. You guys can probably figure it out. Like if you look on Discord or something, people are probably talking about it. But yeah, that like because of that, now I'm thinking Security Breach definitely could be 2035. So yeah, FNAF 3 being in 2033 definitely doesn't work because the quarterly Fazlife magazines, there's 19 of them, which means that the Pizzaplex has to have been opened for at least 4.75 years. And you could say like the Pizzaplex was built like really quickly after FNAF 6, which could have been like really quick after FNAF 3. That I'm fine with. I'm fine with you believing that. I believed that for a while, that it just was built quickly. But that still doesn't work timeline-wise because that's a 2-year difference, not a 4.75-year difference. So that doesn't really work.
That means that FNAF 3, FNAF 6, Help Wanted, Special Delivery, and Security Breach all have to take place in 2 years.
Yeah, that doesn't work because of the Fazlife magazines.
Video. Again, that 20...
Like, if it weren't for the Fazlife magazines, that would be weird, but like technically possible. But because of the Fazlife magazines, no, doesn't work.
35 date has only been theorized about, so there is a chance that, like our initial FNAF 1 date, it's also not correct. Though I will admit, it is annoying if Henry's message in FNAF 6 that was labeled HRY223 has nothing to do with the year of the recording and is just an arbitrary number. Because
I had to like adjust for the Mimic timeline and change my beliefs to FNAF 3 and FNAF 6 being 2015. And maybe 2017, but also still 2015 could work too for FNAF 6. That's like the one thing that it gets on my nerves if that's the case. But also it doesn't work any other way unless you just move Into the Pit forward. But Into the Pit is also problematic. This is if you believe the Stitch line is in the games or the Tales books are in the games, which you don't have to, in which case it works fine for you guys to believe that FNAF 6 was in 2023. But I do, so it just throws a wrench into things because Into the Pit's calendar only works with 2018 and 2029, which means Security Breach has to be 2035 or later, and FNAF 6 has to be, either that, or Security Breach could be in Security Breach couldn't be in 2029 because of the thing that changed. God damn it! This whole thing! FNAF is giving me a mental breakdown recently, I don't know why. But yeah, that means Into the Pit has to have been, it has to either be 2029 or 2018, in which case, no, wait, because the Mimic, and then it's 50 years later. That's the thing that was changed. It was originally, the Mimic and the Storyteller originally had a 40-year gap. Apparently now it's a 50-year gap, which means that if the Mimic is in 79, then 50 years later, it would be 2029. That's when the Pizzaplex has to have opened, because that's when the Storyteller takes place. That means, because of the Fast Life magazines, Security Breach has to be at least 5 years later, and the earliest year that matches the calendar is 2035. So, with that, bearing that in mind, Into the Pit can't be in 2029 because the Pizzaplex isn't built yet in the Stitch Wraith Singers, which means it has to be in 2018, but it also has stuff from the wreckage of FNAF 6, and the Stitch Wraith is in the game, which means that it has to be after the events of FNAF 6, meaning it has to be before 2023. So it's just like a lot of things that are just like really challenging to make work, and that's something that I want to make a video about in the future. I made a video called "Is the FNAF Timeline Broken?" Something along those lines, talking about the Mimic timeline. Now the Mimic timeline is resolved, but there's a slew of other issues that you have to account for because of the Into the Pit game. So that's like what I gotta work on next. I'm currently working on a video on why my old evidence for why Stitchline Games doesn't work, why that evidence wasn't the greatest, and why I now think that it can work. That's the theory that I'm working on right now. After that, I want to do another video talking about the timeline, and like trying to figure out how everything works together. So yeah. Sorry. Hopefully you guys have been able to follow along with what I'm saying. It's even hard for me to follow along, so I apologize if I lost you. But now let's just continue with the 248 seconds left in this video.
So, what now? We've examined the three options it feels like this book is trying to point us towards: 1989, 1998, or 2003. All of them have some pretty decent evidence supporting them, but they also have plenty of weaknesses. So, which one is the definitive true answer?
I'd say 89
I'm sure
works
many
the
of you
best.
are waiting for me to pull out the trump card, the final piece of evidence that will settle this
Even though there's
debate
some problems
and give
with
us
it,
an
obviously.
answer that no one was expecting.
I think it just makes sense
Truth
with
is,
what the
every
book is
time
trying
I tried to solve this
emphasize, I
paradox,
guess.
there was always one
89
piece of
seems
evidence
the
that just
best option
didn't
to me.
fit. If we agree it's 2003, then the paycheck days don't work, and Henry's message number means nothing. If we agree it's 1998, then the animatronics can't have been around for 20 years. There's just no winning.
They could have
This
been,
book
though.
was clearly supposed to give us answers, but a few mistakes or contradictions here and there have made it impossible to do so. And that is so frustrating as a fan of this franchise. We spent the last few years begging for answers to this franchise, and over the last year, it really felt like Scott was answering our prayers, clarifying older details in the franchise. The bite of 87 being revealed to be Foxy in the week before. The
Probably
Spring
not.
Bonnie aerial on the Midnight Motorist car in 5 Laps at Freddy's revealed
Yeah.
that Cheeto Man from Midnight Motorist
Cheeto
was
Man.
Afton all along.
Yeah.
Titophobia revealed that the FNAF 4 nightmares were a result of hallucinogenic gas, not sound illusion discs. But when you actually stop
I'm
and look
genuinely
at
getting a
those now
headache
solved
right now.
mysteries, outside of the
From like that
immediate
rant that I just went on about the timeline, I'm just getting a headache now.
question, what did they actually solve? Cheeto Man is Afton, but we still don't know for sure who the kid that escapes is, who the person in the living room is, what the mound is. FNAF 4 is
Who the
hallucinogenic
footprints
gas.
are.
Okay, cool, but the game still plays out the same way. The bite of 87 was Foxy, but nothing
Probably
else
not.
has developed as a result, other than clearing the name of my beloved Mangle. Even
I
today's
still think it's
mystery, the
Mangle.
date of FNAF 1, what would knowing that year ultimately change about the story? Regardless of whether it's 1998 or 2003, FNAF 3 still happens next and it burns down. Then FNAF 6 happens and it also burns down. Then the Help Wanted VR
It's
game
just
is
weird
made, and
getting
then
everything to
the
fit together,
and is taken over by the Mimic. Sure, it is fun to be able to solve these small loose threads, and so to some degree, I'm thankful that Scott is giving them to us, but they're ultimately hollow gestures, as we're still
it's just weird. It's not satisfying to have certain things just not be solvable or to be inconsistent. So it's really hard to just find a way for everything to fit together. And I'm not one of those people that thinks that just like Scott has messed everything up. He has no idea what the lore is anymore. Or like he knows what the lore is, but there's inconsistencies in it. I'm not one of those people. I think that there is solid answers to these questions. And there's ways that Scott knows. Like, there's ways that Scott has made it work that he knows about, but we just don't know about. Because he went on record in the past. He was like, this could have been just a joke. He could have been wrong. He could be lying. He could be wrong. But he once said, there's no holes in the plot. There's holes in your understanding. And I feel like that's probably true. Like, I think that I feel like he definitely knows the whole lore. I think there's probably little to no inconsistencies in the lore. We just don't know exactly how everything fits together. And that's what's challenging about being a FNAF theorist. I feel like FNAF theorizing has like increased my IQ and just like changed the way that I think about certain things a lot. But it's just like it's just really challenging despite that to figure out how everything is able to fit together. And to a lot of people that is frustrating. It can be at times, but like it's also interesting to be able to try to find different unique ways of approaching these things and trying to make them all fit together. Because again, I think that they can fit together. It's just a matter of figuring out how they do. You know, you guys might disagree. You guys might think that the lore is completely off, like it's completely jumped the shark. Everything is just nonsensical. Maybe you think that there's just complete inconsistencies. The lore is not solvable. I don't think that's the case. You might disagree, but I don't think that's the case. I think that there is solid answers. It's just hard to find them. And I think Scott is trying to help us find them. It's just hard. But again, it's just hard to make everything work with what we've already like learned, grown attached to. Smaller details that we think mean something. Some things might not even mean something, or we're just misinterpreting them in a way. You know, it's just hard to figure out everything. So yeah,
able to use those to figure out the bigger mysteries. What's the deal with Gregory? What happened to Cassie?
I don't know what the deal is with Gregory, man.
Instead, it kind of feels like we're being played with, given small answers to old questions that don't move the story forward. And even then, they're filled with so many contradictions that you still can't solve them all anyway. And that just sucks. It's one of the reasons why a large part of this fandom wants the books to be canon. It may not solve everything, but it gives us much more straightforward stories and explanations. Something
I would agree with that.
That we
I
can
think there's evidence to suggest that the books are canon, or are in the games, and that's why I believe that they are. But I do like that it's just like a lot like more straightforward. It's not just like parallels that we have to like put together in really vague ways and interpret in like really vague parallels that we're supposed to interpret. I think that there are parallels here and there, but I don't think that it's exclusively parallels. I think it's like that's why I believe the books are in the games, just because not only does it make things simpler, but there are like things to suggest that they are. But that also it simplifies things, but at the same time it does complicate things in certain ways. And again, that doesn't mean that the lore is insolvable. That doesn't mean that everything is inconsistent. It just means it's hard to figure out how everything fits together in a tangible way.
May not solve everything, but it gives us much more straightforward stories and explanations.
That doesn't mean it can't. It just means it's hard to figure out how.
And that feels a lot better than the alternative of being left scrambling for details that conflict with each other. We've been left in the dark for so long about so many things, and in a time of so much uncertainty, we want to be able to go to our favorite franchises and feel secure. But instead, it feels as though we're being messed around more and more. As we get close to the end of 2024, and we've got a new year of FNAF upon us, let's just remember to give each other some slack. Whether you believe it's 1989, 1998, 2003, or you want to stick with the original 1993, at the end of the day, we are all working with a broken system, just trying our best to make sense of it. And Scott, if you happen to be watching this, you've got Secret of the Mimic, an interactive novel about Cassie in the Pizzaplex, and another Into the Pit adaptation coming. Let there be some actual answers that help us understand more.
They're already written, so
and please
you asking
make
for this
sure
isn't
there
gonna
aren't
help.
too many contradictions
Really.
this time. And if you need volunteers to help double-check your lore, I might know a good group of people that would be willing to
it's
help
me.
out. But hey, that's just a
When I
theory.
actually
a
upload.
game theory. Thanks for watching. And if you want to watch a mystery that can be solved...
Alright, well. That was that theory. Obviously I don't agree with everything, and I think that there's things that, like, we definitely have to... It's really hard, like I said, to put everything together, to find ways for it to work. But I think there are ways it can work. Again, it's just hard to figure out what they are. And I get that that's frustrating to a lot of people, and I understand that. But also, you don't have to be a FNAF theorist. Like, you can just, like, give up if you want to. There's some people that aren't going to give up. I'm probably, hopefully, one of them. I'll probably stick with FNAF for a while. It's not my favorite game series, for the record. My favorite game series is Resident Evil. But, like, Resident Evil doesn't have, like, really deep lore that you have to do investigating to figure out. Like, FNAF does. That's why, like, I always do FNAF on this channel. Because I am a really big fan of theorizing. I'm not a big fan of debating or editing videos, but I am a big fan of theorizing in general. So, yeah, it's confusing to figure out how the timelines all work together, how everything fits together in a way. But there's definitely a way. Somewhere, you know? But yeah. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like, subscribe if you want to, and let me know what your thoughts are on this video, on this game theory. I've been talking for almost an hour. My throat hurts, my jaw hurts, my head hurts, so I'm gonna shut the fuck up now, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye, guys!